The Great Hall of the Empire was the most beautiful place in 12 galaxies. Its ceiling was made of living crystal that changed colors with the mood of the room. Its floors were polished stone from a planet that no longer existed. Its walls held the history of 1,000 conquered worlds. Today, the hall was filled with the most powerful beings in the known universe. They came from everywhere. They stood 8 feet tall with 4 arms and skin like black metal. They floated in tanks of purple liquid, their jellyfish bodies pulsing with light. They had scales of gold and silver, and their eyes burned like small suns. There were beings made of pure energy, beings made of living rock, beings that existed in multiple dimensions at once. All of them had come for the Centennial Summit. Once every 100 years, the great powers gathered to make deals, form alliances, and decide the fate of entire star systems. It was the most important political event in the galaxy. Queen watched from her throne of crystal and bone. She was ancient. She was powerful. She had ruled the empire for 6,000 years, and she had seen empires rise and fall like waves on a beach. Her body was covered in plates of iridescent armor. Her compound eyes could see in spectrums that other species could not imagine. Her mind held the memories of 10,000 conquered generals. She was bored. The summit had become predictable. The same species made the same threats. The same deals were struck. The same balance of power was maintained. Nothing ever truly changed. Then the doors opened, and something different walked in. It was a human. Queen leaned forward on her throne. Humans were a young species, barely 300 years into space travel. They had a small territory at the edge of the galaxy, maybe 40 star systems. They had been asking for a seat at the summit for decades, and this year, for reasons that amused her, had finally said yes. She expected them to send their best, their strongest warrior, their most brilliant scientist, their most cunning diplomat. She expected a show of force, however small. Every species did this. It was how the game was played. Instead, the humans sent Park. He was a middle-aged man with gray hair and tired eyes. He wore a simple gray suit that looked old and comfortable. He carried no weapons. He had no guards. He did not even have a translator drone hovering near his ear. Just a worn leather bag hanging from his shoulder and a calm expression on his face. He walked into the great hall like he was walking into a library. The whispers started immediately. "Is that the human representative?" a general asked, his 4 arms crossed over his chest. "He looks like a servant." "Perhaps he is a servant," Ambassador replied, her jellyfish body rippling with amusement. "Perhaps the real representative is coming later." "No," said Lord Varix, the most decorated warrior in the military. "I checked the records. This is him, Park, some kind of clerk from their government. The humans have insulted us by sending nothing." Laughter spread through the hall. Hundreds of powerful beings, rulers of star systems and commanders of fleets, all laughing at the small human walking toward the throne. Did not seem to notice, or if he noticed, he did not seem to care. He walked past the warriors, who stood like mountains of black metal. He walked past the who hissed at him with their burning eyes. He walked past the energy beings and the rock creatures and the things that existed in multiple dimensions. He walked through all of them without speeding up or slowing down, without looking left or right, until he stood before the throne of Queen. Then he bowed. It was a simple bow, respectful but not desperate. He bent at the waist, held the position for 3 seconds, then straightened. That was all. Lord Varix made a sound of disgust. He does not know the 14 genuflections. Every species knows the 14 genuflections when addressing the Queen. It is basic protocol. Primitive, Ambassador agreed. Absolutely primitive. Queen studied the human. He was small, soft. His species lived maybe 80 or 90 years before their bodies simply stopped working. They could not regenerate limbs. They could not survive in vacuum. They needed to eat and sleep and breathe constantly just to stay alive. They were, by any objective measure, one of the weakest species in the galaxy. And yet this one stood before her without shaking. "Human," she said, her voice echoing through the hall. "You stand in the presence of Queen, ruler of the Empire, conqueror of the 17 nebulae, voice of the living crystal. Do you understand where you are?" "Yes, Your Majesty," said. His voice was quiet but clear. "I am honored to be here." Honored, tasted the word. "And yet you come alone. No guards, no advisors, no display of your species' achievements. Is this how humans show honor?" "I apologize if I have given offense, Your Majesty. I was sent because I was available." More laughter from the court. Available. The humans had sent whoever was available. Lord Varric stepped forward, his black metal body gleaming. "Your Majesty, this is an insult. The humans mock us by sending this nothing. We should throw him out. We should burn his ships. We should teach them what it means to disrespect the summit." Raised one of her many limbs, and Varix fell silent. "No," she said, "let him stay. It will be educational for him." She looked down with something between amusement and pity. "You may take your seat, human. There is one in the back, near the refuse processors." "Thank you, Your Majesty," said. He bowed again, the same simple bow, and walked toward the back of the hall. As he walked, the other delegates made room for him, not out of respect, out of disgust. They pulled away from him like he was diseased. Some of them laughed openly. Some made rude gestures in their species' traditions. One spat a small flame at his feet, leaving a scorch mark on the ancient stone. Stepped over the scorch mark and kept walking. His seat was exactly where had said, in the very back of the hall, near the machines that processed waste from the delegates. The smell was not pleasant. The view was terrible. It was the worst seat in the entire summit, a seat designed to humiliate. Sat down, placed his leather bag on his lap, and pulled out a notebook. Not a holographic display. A notebook made of paper with a pen made of metal and ink. He began to write. In the front of the hall, the summit continued. Trade agreements were discussed. Military alliances were proposed. The fate of billions was decided with words and gestures and the occasional threat. No one looked at the human in the back. No one except Princess, the Queen's youngest daughter. She sat at her mother's right hand, watching the proceedings with the careful attention expected of a future ruler. But her eyes kept drifting to the back of the hall, to the small figure writing in his paper notebook. Something about him bothered her. He was not afraid. Every other minor species that came to the summit was afraid. They smiled too much. They agreed too quickly. They jumped at loud noises and flinched when the walked past. This human did none of those things. He sat in his terrible seat, near the refuse processors, in a hall full of beings who could destroy his entire species, and he wrote in his notebook like he was taking notes at a university lecture. "Mother," said quietly, "why do you think the humans really sent him?" Queen did not look away from the debate happening before her. "Because they had no one better, child. They are a young species, weak, foolish. They will learn their place or they will be forgotten." Nodded, but she was not satisfied. In the back of the hall, Park finished a page in his notebook and turned to the next. His pen moved steadily across the paper. And somewhere in his tired eyes, there was something that looked almost like patience. 3 days passed at the summit, and Park became a joke. It started small. A warrior would walk past his seat and accidentally bump his shoulder, nearly knocking him from his chair. A servant would spill drinks near his feet. Would breathe smoke in his direction until his eyes watered and he had to wipe them with his sleeve. By the second day, it became a game. Lord Varix was the worst. The great general had conquered 12 star systems. He had killed more enemies than most species had members. His body was covered in scars that he wore like medals, and his 4 arms could tear through ship hulls like paper. He was not used to being ignored, and the human's calm silence felt like an insult. So Varix made it his personal mission to break him. "Human," Varix said on the second morning, standing over Seat like a mountain of black metal, "I have a question for you." Looked up from his notebook. "Yes, Lord Varix." "Your species, you still die, yes. Your cells stop working and you simply end. How long does that take? 60 years, 70? "About 80 years on average," said. "Sometimes more, sometimes less." Varix laughed, a sound like grinding metal. 80 years. I have weapons older than 80 years. I have scars older than 80 years. He leaned down until his face was close to us. "Your entire existence is a blink of an eye. How can you possibly matter?" The other delegates nearby stopped their conversations to watch. This was entertainment. This was sport. Considered the question. "We matter because we choose to," he said. "Time is not the only measure of value." Varix stared at him for a long moment. Then he laughed again and walked away, shaking his head. "The mayfly speaks of value to the immortal. How amusing." More laughter followed, but simply returned to his notebook and continued writing. Ambassador was more subtle in her cruelty. She was the representative of the collective, a species of jellyfish-like beings who lived in tanks of nutrient liquid. They were known for their intelligence and their arrogance, and was the most arrogant of them all. On the second afternoon, she had her servants bring scanning equipment to section. "Forgive me, human," she said, her body pulsing with false politeness. "But my species is very sensitive to contamination. I must ensure you are not carrying any diseases before I pass through this area." The scan took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of standing still while machines examined every part of his body, while other delegates watched and whispered and laughed. 20 minutes of being treated like something dirty that needed to be checked. When it was over, made a show of looking at the results. "Well," she said, "you appear to be clean for now, but please stay in your area, human. We cannot be too careful." "Of course," Ambassador said. "Thank you for your concern." If was hopping for anger, she did not get it, simply sat back down and opened his notebook. By the third day, even the minor delegates had joined the game. Beings who would never dare insult or felt safe insulting the human. They knocked over his water glass. They made jokes about his species short. They asked him questions designed to humiliate. "Is it true humans still reproduce through physical contact? How primitive." "I heard humans cannot even survive in vacuum. What do you do if your ship breaks? Simply die." "Your species burns dead plants for energy, yes. Tell me, does your smell as bad as you do?" Through all of it, remained calm. He answered questions politely. He cleaned up spilled water without complaint. He ate his simple packed meals while others feasted on delicacies from 100 worlds. He wrote in his paper notebook with his metal pen. Princess could not understand it. She was young by standards, only 400 years old, but she had been trained since birth to read other beings, to understand their weaknesses and desires. Every species had a breaking point. Every individual had something that made them angry, something that made them afraid. The human seemed to have neither. On the third evening, found an excuse to walk past the back of the hall. She pretended to examine a tapestry on the wall while actually studying the human from the corner of her compound eyes. He was writing in his notebook. His handwriting was small and neat. The pages were filled with observations, questions, notes about different species and their behaviors. He was not just sitting here being humiliated. He was learning. "You are the princess." Froze. She had not realized he knew she was watching. "Yes," she said, turning to face him. "I am daughter of queen." Inclined his head respectfully. "An honor, your highness." Studied him. Up close he looked even more ordinary. Gray hair, tired eyes, lines on his face that spoke of age and worry. He could have been any middle-aged human from any human world. "You do not seem angry," she said. "Should I be angry, your highness?" You have been insulted, humiliated, treated worse than servants. Most beings would be furious. Consider this. Anger is useful sometimes, but not here. Here, it would only make things worse. So you simply accept the treatment. I accept that this is how things are, for now. There was something in those last two words that made pause, for now, as if he expected things to change. My mother thinks your species is weak, she said. Many species think that. Are they wrong? Smiled. It was a small smile, barely visible, but it reached his tired eyes. That depends on how you define strength, Your Highness. Before could respond, a commotion erupted at the front of the hall. Lord Varix was arguing with a commander about fleet positions. Voices were rising. The air was filling with the tension that came before violence. Turned to watch, her duties calling her back to her mother's side. When she looked back he had returned to his notebook. That night, as the delegates retired to their quarters, walked through the ancient corridors of the palace. She was thinking about the human and his strange calm, his notebook full of observations, his smile that seemed to hold secrets. She passed a group of ancient delegates, beings so old that they had stopped attending the main sessions. They were called the witnesses, and they had seen the rise and fall of empires that most species had forgotten. One of them, a being of pure light called simply the witness, was speaking to another ancient creature. The human, the witness was saying, "Yes, I noticed him too." Stopped, hidden in the shadows. "Do you recognize him?" the other ancient asked. The witness pulsed with soft light. "I am not certain, but something about him feels familiar, something about the way he waits." "Waits for what?" "That," the witness said, "is what I am trying to remember." Stayed in the shadows until the ancients drifted away. Then she walked back to her chambers, her mind full of questions. Who was Park, really? And what was he waiting for? In the back of the great hall, the human's notebook lay closed on his empty seat. Tomorrow would be the final day of the summit. Tomorrow, the great powers would announce their plans for the future. And tomorrow, everything would change. But for now, the hall was quiet. The crystal ceiling had dimmed to a soft purple, the color of sleep. The refuse processors hummed their endless hum. And somewhere in the guest quarters, Park lay awake in his small bed, staring at the ceiling. He was thinking about patience. He was thinking about time. He was thinking about questions, and how the right question at the right moment could change the fate of worlds. He had waited 70 years for this moment. He could wait one more day. The final day of the summit began with drums. Deep, thundering drums made from the shells of creatures that had died before most species learned to walk upright. The sound shook the walls of the great hall and made the crystal ceiling ring like a bell. It was the sound of power, the sound of history being made. Every delegate was present. Even the ones who had skipped the earlier sessions came for this. The final day was when the real decisions happened. Wars were declared. Alliances were formed. The map of the galaxy was redrawn with words and threats and promises. Park sat in his usual seat near the refuse processors. He had his notebook open on his lap, his pen ready. He looked the same as he had looked every day. Calm, patient, invisible. But Princess noticed that he had stopped writing. He was waiting. Queen rose from her throne and the drums fell silent. Her body caught the light of the crystal ceiling, making her look like she was made of fire. Her voice carried to every corner of the hall. "The summit draws to a close," she announced. "We have made great progress. Trade routes have been secured. Disputes have been settled. The galaxy is more stable than it was 5 days ago." Murmurs of approval rippled through the delegates. "But there is one matter that remains." His voice hardened. "The void harvesters." The mood in the hall changed instantly. The murmurs stopped, backs straightened, hands moved toward weapons. Everyone knew about the void harvesters. They were machines, ancient machines, built by a species that had died so long ago that no one remembered their name. They traveled through space in fleets of 10,000 ships, and wherever they went, they consumed stars. Not planets, not civilization, stars. They would surround a star with their ships and begin to feed. Within a few years, the star would be gone, reduced to a cold husk. Any planets around it would freeze. Any civilizations would die. The void harvesters had consumed over 100 stars in the past century. They were moving toward the populated regions of the galaxy. They did not respond to communication. They did not negotiate. They simply consumed. "I propose," Queen said, "a grand alliance against the void harvesters. The Empire will provide ships. The will provide warriors. The collective will provide intelligence. Together, we will find the harvesters and destroy them before they can consume another star." Lord Varric stepped forward, his 4 arms raised in salute. "They are ready. We will tear these machines apart piece by piece." "The collective agrees," Ambassador added. "These machines are a threat to all organic life." One by one, the great powers announced their support. They would send their fire fleets. The energy beings would provide power for the war effort. Even the ancient witnesses nodded their approval. It was decided. The galaxy would go to war. Queen smiled, her mandibles clicking with satisfaction. "Then it is done. We will assemble our forces within the year. The void harvesters will learn what it means to threaten the civilized galaxy." She paused, then added with a thin smile, "The humans, of course, may observe. Perhaps they will learn something about how real powers handle threats." Laughter echoed through the hall, the same laughter that had followed for 3 days. And then the human raised his hand. The laughter died. It did not fade away. It simply stopped like someone had cut it with a knife, because no one could believe what they were seeing. The human was raising his hand. The small, weak, insignificant human was asking to speak. Queen stared at him. "You wish to say something, human?" "If I may, Your Majesty." His voice was the same as always, quiet, calm, polite. His compound eyes narrowed. For a moment, thought her mother would refuse, would have the human removed from the hall, would end this ridiculous interruption and continue with the business of war. But something made her hesitate. Maybe curiosity, maybe arrogance, maybe just the desire to see what foolishness the human would offer. "You may speak," said. "One question, make it brief." Stood up, he did not rush. He did not shake. He simply rose from his seat near the refuse processors and looked across the great hall at the most powerful beings in the galaxy. "Have you considered," he said, "that the void harvesters may not want conquest?" Silence. Complete, total silence. Then Lord Varric laughed. It was a harsh sound full of contempt. "Not want conquest. They consume stars. They destroy entire systems. What else could they possibly want?" "I have read the reports," said. "All the stars the void harvesters have consumed were dying stars. Red giants near the end of their lives. Brown dwarfs cooling toward death. Stars that would have exploded within a few thousand years and destroyed everything around them." Murmurs rippled through the hall, confused murmurs, angry murmurs. "The harvesters are not destroying life," continued. "They are preventing destruction. They consume stars before those stars can explode and sterilize nearby systems. They are not killers. They are caretakers." Lord Varric surged forward, his 4 arms clenched into fists. You dare stand in this hall and defend those machines. You dare suggest we negotiate with things that have killed billions." "Have they killed billions?" asked. His voice did not rise, his posture did not change. "Or have they saved trillions by preventing stellar explosions?" "They do not respond to communication," Varric roared. "They do not respond to threats," corrected gently. "That is a different thing." The hall erupted. Delegates shouted accusations. Lord Varric demanded the human be arrested. Ambassador called him a machine sympathizer. The breath fire into the air. The energy beings pulsed with angry light. Everyone was talking, shouting, threatening. Everyone except the ancient witnesses. Notice them first. The oldest beings in the hall, the ones who had seen empires rise and fall, were completely still. They were watching the human with expressions that could not read. And then one of them spoke. The witness, the being of pure light who had been silent for 40 years. Its voice cut through the chaos like a blade, and everyone fell silent. "Queen," the witness said, "do you know who this human is?" Turned toward the ancient being. Her posture was still angry, but there was confusion in her compound eyes. "He is Park, a minor clerk from the human government, nothing more." "No," the witness said. Its light pulsed slowly, rhythmically, like a heartbeat. "He is not." The hall was completely silent now. Even Lord Varix had stopped moving. Everyone was watching the exchange between the Queen and the Ancient. "What do you mean?" asked. The witness drifted forward, its light casting strange shadows on the walls. 70 years ago, the Void Harvesters came to human space. They arrived with 10,000 ships. The humans had 3. Felt something cold move through her body. 3 ships against 10,000. "The humans should have died," the witness continued. "Every calculation said they would die. Every model predicted their destruction, but they did not die. Do you know why?" Queen did not answer. "Because of him." The witness turned toward. "Because of that man standing in the back of your hall near the refuse processors, wearing a simple gray suit." Every eye in the hall turned toward Park. He stood quietly, his notebook closed, his hands folded in front of him. He did not look proud. He did not look angry. He looked like what he had always looked like. A tired, patient man with gray hair and calm eyes. "Who is he?" asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The witness's light pulsed once, twice, 3 times. "He is the first voice, the only organic being who has ever spoken with the Void Harvesters. The man who stopped a war with words when every weapon in his species' arsenal would have been useless." The light grew brighter. "He is the reason humanity still exists, and you have spent 3 days letting your court use him as a joke." Silence. Perfect, crushing silence. And in that silence, Park inclined his head slightly, a small gesture of acknowledgement. "I was younger then," he said, "less gray." No one laughed. The great hall of the Empire had never been this quiet. 1,000 delegates stood frozen, their eyes fixed on the small human near the refuse processors. Lord Varix's 4 arms hung loose at his sides. Ambassador's body had stopped pulsing. Even the energy beings had dimmed their light. Queen descended from her throne. It was a slow movement, careful and deliberate. She had not descended for a visiting delegate in over 200 years. The last time she had done it was for an ancient being who had helped create her empire. Now she was doing it for a human in a gray suit. Her legs made soft clicking sounds on the stone floor. The living crystal ceiling had shifted to a deep blue, the color of shock. She stopped 3 meters from. "Explain," she said. It was not a request. It was not even a command. It was the sound of someone whose entire understanding of the world had just been broken. The witness drifted forward. "Perhaps I should tell the story, Your Majesty. I was there. I saw it happen." Nodded without looking away from. The witness's light pulsed gently as it began. 70 standard years ago, the Void Harvesters entered human space. They had just consumed a dying star at the edge of human territory. The humans detected them and sent their fleet, 3 ships, small ships, barely armed. The witness paused. "We thought they were fools. We thought we were watching the end of a species." "But the humans did not attack," the witness continued. "They sent a message, not a threat, not a demand, a greeting. And when the harvesters did not respond, they sent another, and another, and another." Leaned forward in her seat, completely absorbed. The harvesters surrounded their ships, 10,000 machines against 3. It should have taken seconds to destroy them, but the harvesters did not fire. They waited. They watched. "Why?" Ambassador asked, her voice small and confused. "Because no one had ever spoken to them before," the witness said. "In 50 million years of existence, no organic species had ever tried to talk to the harvesters. Every civilization saw them and ran, or saw them and attacked, or saw them and died, but no one ever simply said hello." The witness's light shifted toward. Except him. Stood quietly, his hands still folded, his expression unchanged. When the human fleet was surrounded, their commanders wanted to fight, wanted to die with honor, but this man convinced them to wait. He was a linguist, a scholar of patterns and languages. He believed that anything that behaved with logic could communicate. He spent the next 14 months on a small station at the edge of human space, broadcasting messages to the harvesters. Not in human language, not in any known language. He created new languages, mathematical languages, pattern languages. He tried thousands of combinations, millions of variations. And one day, the harvesters responded. The hall seemed to hold its breath. "What did they say?" Queen asked. The witness pulsed with something that might have been emotion. "They said, finally, someone who listens." Silence again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. This was the silence of understanding beginning to form. The harvesters told their story, the witness continued. They were built by a species that died 50 million years ago, a species that knew stars could destroy everything they loved. So they built the harvesters to prevent it, to consume dying stars before they could explode, to protect organic life throughout the galaxy. But their creators died and the harvesters forgot how to speak. They continued their mission in silence, and every time they tried to approach organic civilizations, those civilizations attacked, so the harvesters stopped trying. For 50 million years they protected the galaxy alone, in silence, with no thanks, watching the civilizations they saved try to destroy them. Felt tears forming in her compound eyes. She did not know she could feel sorry for machines. Until this man, the witness turned fully toward, until this man said hello. The harvesters shared everything with humanity. Star maps showing every dying star in 3 galaxies, technology for predicting stellar events, methods for safely redirecting stellar energy, everything. In exchange, they asked for one thing, a promise. Queen's voice was barely a whisper. What promise? That organic civilizations would remember their purpose, that someone would explain what they were doing, that they would not have to be alone anymore. The witness dimmed slightly, its light turning soft. This man made that promise. He spent 20 years as humanity's ambassador to the harvesters. He built bridges between machine and organic intelligence. He did what no one in 50 million years had done. He listened. Silence filled the hall again, but now eyes were looking at differently. The mockery was gone. The contempt was gone. Something else had taken its place. Queen spoke slowly. "You allowed us to mock you. For 3 days you sat in that seat and endured our insults. Why?" Looked at her with his tired, patient eyes. "Because I wanted to see." "See what?" "Whether you would listen." He gestured to the hall around them. "You have gathered the greatest powers in the galaxy, 1,000 species with 1,000 different ways of understanding the universe, and instead of asking questions, you made assumptions." His voice did not rise, but somehow it filled the entire hall. "About me, about the harvesters, about what strength looks like." Lord Varix shifted uncomfortably. His 4 arms that had seemed so threatening now seemed awkward, uncertain. "I came here hoping you would ask questions before preparing for war. I came hoping you would see a quiet old man in a gray suit and wonder why the humans sent him. Wonder what he knew. Wonder what he had done." Reached into his worn leather bag and pulled out a small device. It was old and battered, covered in scratches and dents, but it pulsed with a soft light that seemed to match the witness's glow. The harvesters gave me this 70 years ago, a communication beacon. If I activate it, they will come, all of them, not as enemies, as allies. He held the beacon gently, like it was something precious. They have been waiting for organic civilizations to understand, waiting for someone to explain their purpose, waiting to stop being alone. He looked at Queen. They have been waiting for 70 years, because I told them there were beings in this galaxy who would eventually listen. I told them that if I attended enough summits and spoke to enough rulers, eventually someone would ask the right question. His voice softened. No one ever did, until today when I asked it myself, and even then you almost went to war. Stared at the beacon. Her compound eyes reflected its soft glow. Her entire body was still, frozen between the ruler she had been and something new. What would you have us do? She asked. Stepped forward and placed the beacon in her hands. Talk to them, not with threats, not with weapons, just talk. Tell them you understand what they do. Tell them you are grateful. Tell them they are not alone. He looked around the hall. That is all they have ever wanted. That is all any of us want, really, to be seen, to be understood, to know that our existence matters to someone. Queen looked at the beacon for a long moment. Then she looked at the human who had given it to her, the human she had insulted, humiliated, and dismissed. The human who was offering her a chance to change everything. And if I activate this, she said slowly, what happens? Smiled. It was the same small smile had seen before, but now she understood what it meant. It was the smile of someone who had waited 70 years for this moment. Then, he said, we stop preparing for war, and we start building something better. 3 months after the summit, the galaxy changed. The great hall of the Empire had been transformed. The crystal ceiling now glowed with patterns that matched the communication signals of the void harvesters. The walls displayed star maps showing every dying sun in 3 galaxies, and instead of warriors and rulers, the hall was filled with scholars, scientists, and linguists. They called it the first dialogue. At the center of the hall, floating in perfect silence, was a void harvester, not a fleet of 10,000, just one, a single machine that had traveled across the galaxy to speak with organic beings for the first time in millions of years. It was beautiful in a way that no one had expected. Its surface was not cold metal but something that shifted and changed, like living mercury. Its shape was not fixed but fluid, constantly adjusting to express emotions that machines were not supposed to have. And when it spoke, its voice was not harsh or mechanical but soft and warm, like a parent speaking to a child. We are grateful, the harvester said. For so long we believed no one would ever understand. Queen stood before it, her posture humble in a way that would have been unthinkable 3 months ago. We are the ones who should be grateful. We almost destroyed those who have protected us for millions of years. You did not know. How could you know? We forgot how to speak, and speaking is how understanding begins. In the back of the hall, Park sat in a comfortable chair, watching the exchange with quiet satisfaction. His seat was no longer near the refuse processors. It was in the place of honor, surrounded by delegates who had once mocked him. Lord Varric stood nearby. The great general had not spoken much since the revelation. His 4 arms hung loose at his sides, and his posture was uncertain. I owe you an apology, Varric said finally. I treated you as an enemy, as something beneath me. Looked up at him. You treated me as most species treat the unknown, with fear and contempt. It is natural. That does not make it right. No, but it makes it understandable, gestured to the harvester at the center of the hall. They did not hold our attacks against us. They understood that fear creates violence. Perhaps we can learn to be as forgiving. Varric was silent for a moment. Then he did something that no one had ever seen a general do. He bowed. a deep, respectful bow, the kind reserved for honored elders. "Thank you," he said, "for your patience." Inclined his head. "Thank you for listening, eventually." Princess approached as Varix walked away. She had changed in the past 3 months. Her compound eyes still held the sharpness of a future ruler, but there was something else there now. Curiosity, openness, a willingness to see things differently. "May I sit with you?" she asked. "Of course, Your Highness." She sat beside him, watching the dialogue continue. The harvester was explaining how it navigated between stars, how it decided which ones needed to be consumed, how it felt to do work that would never be thanked. "I have been thinking," said, "about what you did, about waiting 70 years for the right moment." "It was a long wait," admitted. "Some days I wondered if the moment would ever come." "What made you keep trying?" Considered the question. "I made a promise, to the harvesters and to myself, that I would not give up until someone listened, until someone asked the right question." "But no one ever asked. You had to ask it yourself." "Yes," he smiled slightly. "Sometimes that is how it works. Sometimes you have to create the opportunity yourself, but I believe it is always worth trying, because the one time it works changes everything." Pulled out a small notebook from her robes. It was made of paper, imported from Earth at great expense. She opened it to show pages filled with careful handwriting. "I have been learning," she said, "taking notes, trying to understand different perspectives like you do." His eyes lit up with something that might have been pride. "That is the beginning of everything: observation, curiosity, the willingness to question what you think you know." "Will you teach me more?" "It would be my honor, Your Highness." They sat together, watching the dialogue continue. The harvester was now showing images of the stars it had saved, the systems that still existed because of its work. Billions of beings were alive because of these machines. Billions who had never known, never thanked, never even noticed. Hours passed. The dialogue became a discussion, then a negotiation, then something that looked almost like friendship. The harvesters agreed to share their technology. The organic civilizations agreed to help maintain and repair the harvester fleet. For the first time in 50 million years, the machines would not be alone. As the session ended, Queen approached seat. She moved differently now. The arrogance was still there, but it was tempered with something else. Awareness, perhaps, understanding of how close she had come to making a terrible mistake. "I have been thinking about what you said," she told him. "About assumptions, about questions, about what strength looks like." Stood to meet her. "And what have you concluded, Your Majesty?" Was quiet for a moment. Her compound eyes seemed to look at something far away. "I have ruled for 6,000 years," she said. "I have conquered worlds, destroyed enemies, built an empire that spans half a galaxy, and in all that time I never once considered that my greatest weakness might be my refusal to ask questions." She looked at him directly. "You sat in that terrible seat for 3 days. You let us mock you, insult you, treat you as nothing, and you did it because you wanted to see if anyone would wonder why." "Yes." "No one did." "No. That is the most damning thing I have ever heard about my court." His voice held something new. Shame, perhaps, or the beginning of change. "We were so certain of our power that we could not imagine being wrong. We were so proud of our empire that we could not see wisdom in a quiet man with a paper notebook." She reached out with one of her limbs and touched his shoulder. It was a gesture of respect that she had never given to any human. "I will do better," she said. "My empire will do better. We will ask questions before we draw swords. We will listen before we assume. We will remember what you taught us." Looked at her with his tired, patient eyes. The same eyes that had watched the void harvesters for 14 months. The same eyes that had waited 70 years for this moment. "That is all I ever hoped for, Your Majesty." The summit was remembered for generations, not for the military alliance that never formed, but for the question that changed everything. Children across the galaxy learned about Park, the human who proved that patience was stronger than fleets, that listening was stronger than weapons, that a quiet question asked at the right moment could save more lives than all the armies ever built. Years later, when became queen of the empire, she kept a paper notebook on her throne. She filled it with questions, with observations, with reminders to listen before assuming, to ask before attacking. And in human schools, children learned a simple lesson. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is be underestimated. Sometimes the greatest strength is patience. Sometimes the answer to every problem is not a weapon or a threat, but a willingness to sit quietly and wait for someone to ask the right question. Park lived for another 30 years after the first dialogue. He spent them traveling between species, building bridges, teaching the art of listening. When he finally died peacefully in his sleep, messages of mourning came from every corner of the galaxy. The Void Harvesters sent a representative to his funeral, a single machine that floated silently above his grave and played a sound that no organic being had ever heard before. It was the Harvester word for friend. And across the galaxy, beings